Oh, I start. I'm sorry. Hello, welcome. Somehow I expected something else to happen. I don't know, lights or applause or something. But let's see. This is an introduction. This is an info session for Amplify, an alumni-led book club. My name is Janine Kovac, and I was at Hedgebrook in 2016 with these amazing writers. And one of the phenomenal things about being in residence is that you build these connections and these ties that are still present almost 8 years later. So the gist of this book club is that we will be going through the books that are now out in the world, in large part because of our time together at Hedgebrook. And we get to share them with each other and with everyone as part of the book club. So I will introduce the writers who are here today. And we have 5 writers in the room, 6, I guess, if I count myself. The summer cohort is 3 of these writers, and then we'll have a fall cohort. But I'll get to that in a minute. So our first writer today in the room, Anu Taranath, and she's the author of Beyond Guilt Trips. That is our July read. And then Nana Darkoa Sekyiamah, who's the author of I don't know if this is mirror image or not, The Sex Lives of African Women. And then we also have Putsata Reang, the author of Ma and Me. That's September. We also have in the room Sarah Novich, who's the author of True Biz. And I'm not at my house. I'm at my mother's house. And Dion, your book is on loan to someone at church who hasn't returned it. But Dion Ford is also here, and she is the author of Go Back and Get It. So let's see. I have a list of questions, but I also want to open it up to anyone who would like to say something. Hello, welcome. We're all back at a virtual farmhouse table.
It's really nice to see everyone. Yes, it's great to see you all.
I just wanted to say it's actually so exciting, Janine, that you could show physical copies of our book. I know we're in the virtual world, so you're not showing us, but you're holding books that we were talking about and discussing.
Yes.
And all of us now have those books out in the world, and I think that is incredible.
Yes.
So congratulations to all of you. Congratulations to all of us.
All of us. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Well, that's kind of
I got a second, Nana, and also say that this is making me think about the very first time I stepped into the Hedgebrook Library, and I saw all these books for alum on the shelves, and this is almost that library come to life in a way. So
beautiful.
It is.
Yes.
It is. And so for those maybe watching who have not been to Hedgebrook, you might know you have a gingerbread cottage, and you go and you write in the gingerbread cottage, and you have your meals in a little picnic basket. And then at the end of the day, you meet for dinner around the farmhouse table. And I wanted to ask, what were your first impressions of, and the other thing that happens is we have overlapping cohorts. So Sarah and Dion and I were in residence for a couple of weeks, and then some people went out and some new people came in, and those new people, the other writers new to us writers were Anu and Put and Nana. And so I want to ask, do you remember what it was like that first day when you sat at the farmhouse table and everyone's smiling because they know what's going to happen on your first day because they've already had their own first day. And Dion and Sarah, I know you both have to go early, so do you want to chime in first about your first day? Dion, do you want to go? Do you remember?
Sure, I'll go first. I was, first of all, thank you so much for organizing this. This is so fantastic to be able to, number one, just share the magnificence that is Hedgebrook, and number two, get together with the people that I was able to be in residence with. It's really special. So, and I think that's really my first memory was just how special it was to be there. I was kind of overwhelmed with excitement, a little bit jet lagged. And more than anything, just really grateful to have that opportunity. And then to come into that beautiful space with the delicious food and see these gorgeous faces of, other writers just wanting to have time to, work on their projects. It was just, I was full of joy. What can I say? I was completely filled with joy. And I'm pretty sure I had the best cohort ever. So, and that includes all of you. Passing it to Sarah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. My memory from Hedgebrook, I was scared when I got there at the farmhouse table because it's always been scary for me with the communication piece when I meet new people, if people are going to be patient with me, if people are going to be willing to repeat themselves over and over again. And so for a while, I think I just sat there and kind of observed and took everything in, and the space, and kind of learning who's going to be willing to work with me and who will be more closed off. And then I quickly just realized that everyone who was there was awesome. And so that was really such a relief and just such a big excitement for me to be able to just really feel like I'm part of a community of writers. And we're not all the same. So that was just a very new experience for me.
Oh, that's amazing. Anu, do you remember your time? How long you were there? Do you remember?
I was there, I think, 7 days. And like Sarah, I felt a lot of nervousness, a lot of, should I be here? All kinds of impostery things flowing through. It was a time when I had thought that I was a writer, but I wasn't quite sure. I had wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't quite sure. And so sitting at the farmhouse, sitting in that cabin with my laptop and my notes, it offers you a chance to actually look closely at yourself, to certainly learn and see your reflection in the eyes of all the other people that are around that table, but also to have to look at yourself in a deeper way, and to ask, am I a writer? If I'm a writer, here I am. And what do I want to do with this gift of a week? What can I offer myself? I remember thinking a lot and going deep in me to try to really unpack some of the messages I had heard, the negative messages that I had heard, and also the ways that I want to vibrate in the world, not through negativity, but through an abundance framework, through a mindset of gratitude, and being able to offer what I can. It was a very introspective week, I remember. Very much so.
Nana, I'll let everyone chime in and then I'll do a little response. Nana, what do you remember?
So what I remember is how inspirational I found the people I met, right? And I remember it's incredible to me that Sarah said she felt nervous being there, because for me, Sarah was like a rock star. She already had like a major book out in the wild, you know? So, yeah, like it's wild to me. And I remember, Putsata, you had this modern love story.
Yes.
I was just like, oh my God. And then you're like, what do I have? But for me, it was really inspirational because, you know, I really think the dinners are an important part. The dinners, the sharing of our work, because we would meet and share our work and would drink some wine. And I remember people, like, I really didn't know how to get my book published. And I remember people advising me to get an agent. And it was literally after Hedgebrook that I started looking for an agent. So, and it was a Hedgebrook, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, Janine, but it was a Hedgebrook that I wrote the first 10 chapters of my book, you know? And so once that was done, it was like, okay, you know, I have started, I can move forward. So for me, Hedgebrook was really fundamental. And to this day, Hedgebrook is really my model of a feminist residency in all the ways, from how and who founded it, to the care with which the staff held us, to the space. Yeah, I could gush about Hedgebrook forever.
Yeah. Put, what were your first impressions?
Nana, we would love to hear you gush about Hedgebrook forever also. I'll be straight up with y'all. My very first feeling entering the farmhouse for the first time, I felt hungry. And I say that because I had kept hearing how amazing the food at Hedgebrook was. And that was no lie. It was some of the best food in my life. I've eaten in the farmhouse kitchen, which is why I gave a shout out to the chefs in my in the acknowledgments of my memoir as well. It was that the chefs who fed us were that important to me. I don't think that we as writers or creative types can actually ever really appreciate what Hedgebrook is, including something that might seem as simple as somebody feeding us, until you actually get there and you realize, oh, I actually literally can just focus all of my creative energy and my thoughts and my effort on writing. But more than that, I think what was phenomenal was just repeating and agreeing with and reaffirming what Nana said about meeting all these extraordinary human beings. I don't know that I've ever felt a more delicious sense of belonging than being at that Hedgebrook table with all of you and other cohort members as well. And not only, as Nana mentioned, not only was it inspiring, it was deeply and profoundly inspiring, but it really gave me the sense that I'm here to write, and that's what I'm going to do. And it just reaffirmed my sense of mission for why I applied, why I was there, what I was going to do while I was there.
That's everything. I will echo everything that everyone has said. And my own experience was, I got there late in the day. Someone helped me carry all my things. I had so many things. When I unpacked, it turned out that I had brought like 15 pencil sharpeners and 2 pencils. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was prepared to sharpen those pencils. And I got to the farmhouse table. Oh, and the person who had picked me up at the ferry, or I'm not even sure how I got there. It's such a blur. It's like I just showed up at my cottage. I said, "You're here now. You're done. You could just nap." And just to have somebody say that there were no obligations or have tos, or just, for me, that was my first sense of what radical hospitality could be, that I could just show up and be there. And that was it. And then I got to the farmhouse table, and there's so much space to have that imposter syndrome, but and not that that doesn't, kind of knock on your head, but just to sit and listen at the table and just see the stories that came out and participate in a way that the stories are shared. And a lot of times we didn't even talk about writing. It was just stories. And I felt like I spent much of that time just watching and being a part in that way that was that lifted me up, and just felt like, oh, I'm here now. I'm and then I go back to my cottage, and everything that Anu said about the introspection, like, oh, all the ways that I have interruptions and distractions to give me an excuse to not write. What are you going to do if you don't have that? Mm-hmm. Maybe you do nap and you wake up with an idea, or maybe you take a walk, or maybe you write. And it was really profound. And the other thing that was just still so amazing to me is that when you have that sense of community in an artistic way, or between artists or writers, it lasts. Like the fact that we can have this conversation here and know each other, mm-hmm. instead of like, oh, I don't remember that person. Of course, we all remember. Such a profound core memories in our writing lives and artist lives. And I'm so grateful for that, and so glad that we are here together. And I don't know if somebody wants to add something. I want to talk about your books. I want to talk about what excites me about sharing your book. But if anyone wants to add something about the community and that experience, please raise your hand and chime in. Go ahead.
Oops, sorry. Because actually, I was also going to speak about you. Because I was going to say, in many ways, even though on one hand, the residency, I feel, is very much focused on the US, somehow there's also a global element to it, right? In terms of our heritages, where we come from. Yes. I came from Ghana for the residency. Anu's work is very much global, and Anu's made several visits to Ghana, and each time we've spent time together. So that's also been incredible. There's been some sort of global connectivity built as well.
Right. That happens post-residency, that you make those connections and you have them. And of course, in a virtual sense, it's that much easier for us to connect, because we can all call in from our living rooms or our mother's living rooms, and just foster what happens, that amazing thing that happens at the farmhouse table. It's just kind of an accident of scheduling, really, that we apply when we apply, and we get in when we get in, and we can carve out the time when we can carve out the time. And then we have this intersection that is that grows its own garden. And yeah, very exciting. And so June 12th, that's next, I don't know, is that next Wednesday? Flame, you can put something in the chat about next Wednesday is the application deadline for Hedgebrook. I always tell people that filling out the Hedgebrook application, I applied 4 times and got in on the 4th try. Okay, June 12th. I always say that the process of filling out the application made me a better writer. All those times that I didn't get in, it was, who doesn't want to just like show up at the cottage? But even just filling out the application and having to ask those questions of myself about my writing made me think about what I was trying to say and who I was trying to say it to. So if anyone wants to add to that, I know I want to be mindful of having to go. People, it's a mother. There's Dion has her mother stuff that she has to do, and Sarah and all of this. So chime in if there's something you wanted to say about the application process, or what you tell other people. Anyone?
I'll just chime in really quick since I'm going to have to go in a few minutes to say that I also, it's comprehensive, the application. And I actually did find the part, one of the parts was really helpful to me in thinking a bit more specifically and more focused about my project. And so I did appreciate that, actually. I don't know, it gave me sort of a deeper handle on why exactly I was working on this project, and why it felt imperative to, do it in that moment. So I did appreciate that. Yeah, it did give me another level of clarity about my book. So I'm grateful for that.
And Sarah, you've been to other residencies and applied for other things. Did you think, was there any way that the Hedgebrook experience and application helped you in those other spaces or applications?
I think Hedgebrook itself, that was my first residency experience. And so that's going to be like my baseline forever. I feel like I'm spoiled forever. But I think if I knew how cool Hedgebrook was going to be, I would have been more scared to fill out the application. But because I actually didn't know anything about it, it was my first time doing this whole process. I'd never been there, and I just went ahead and went with it and like put my whole heart on there. So I just fully, like, whatever came to mind, I just filled it out as honestly as I could. So yeah, I just fully exposed and went ahead with it.
Amazing. Nana, you talked about, we come to the table, we're from different backgrounds, culturally and even country-wise, but there's also those different perspectives of how we find our way into authenticity. And I feel like that's the core thing that I see when I read applications for Hedgebrook, that a writer knows how to show their authentic self in their writing and have that awareness. And that's what I felt I got from watching all of you and being in community with you in our cohort, is seeing how you show up for yourselves in your authentic writer selves. So Sarah, I'm not surprised at all that you're just like, all right, I'm going for it. I'm just going to put, because I see that so much in your writing, not just in your novels, but also in your Substack. You can Google all of us and find various ways that we get our information out, but I do want to plug Sarah's Substack and her Instagram, where they really show, I learn about how I can show up and maybe see how I learn a lot from your Substack. I could go on and on, but in terms of communicating with others and so on. Did I talk over someone?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Maybe this is where we have the people backstage who can put things into the chat for links and so on. So I will. Okay, there we go. Yes, the Hedgebrook fairies are coming and adding things. Anything else about the application process, your experience, before we dive into some of the books that we'll talk about?
So I love that, Janine, you shared that you applied 4 times before you got in, because to be honest, I feel like getting into any sort of residency program or anything, right, is kind of random. It is kind of random. And so I just encourage people to give it a go and give it their best go. And everything you said about authenticity rings true. And at the same time, do not be stressed if you don't get in, and don't think you're not a good writer if you don't get in. because I have been like in a position where I've had to select people for a residency, a much, much smaller residency that nobody's heard of, you know. And I remember taking some random decisions like, oh, I think this person already has a bit of a profile, so they don't need this as much as the other person. So I feel like choices can get made for a range of reasons. And so I would just say to folks who want to apply, do give it your best shot. If you get in, great. If you don't get in, you can continue to apply if you really want to get into Hedgebrook. Or, you know, you can also apply to a variety of residencies. I think the benefit of being on a residency is very much what Put said, where you get there, you realize, okay, actually, I have to focus. I'm surrounded by other writers. I see them writing. You know, we're having conversations about writing, and you can enter a world, and especially I think as women, you know, a lot of us are torn in many, many directions, right? And we have to be caregivers and nurturers, and we get into a space where actually we are told you can just focus on your work, and that's very rare. And I think that's the beauty and gift in going to residencies. I found them extremely beneficial, so I'll always encourage folks to apply, and at the same time say, do not be stressed if you don't get in. I don't think it's a reflection of your ability as a writer.
Absolutely. And I think the magic of coming together and supporting, you're showing up for yourself and supporting yourself as a writer, and being in community with other writers who can honor that, for whom you can also honor that in them. That doesn't necessarily have to be in an isolated place in the woods. So during the pandemic, there was a Hedgebrook alum write-in that is still going on 4 years later, every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific to, 2 p.m. And it's not as many writers as it was in the early pandemic when no one could leave their homes, but it's still going on. And we supported each other in that virtual space. There are books that have come out of that virtual writing space. And so there are lots of ways to show up for yourself as a writer and show up for people around you. Although it's so much easier to do that when the way is paved for you. I don't know if I would be able to, let me say that differently. Being at the farmhouse table around other writers that I admired just by being in community with them and sharing their stories or hearing them share their stories opened me up to understand how I could show up for other people. So when there is a role model for you, that does make a difference. And Hedgebrook was that role model, and how I can be here celebrating your books that we will talk about in this cohort. So Sarah and Dion, is there any last thing you have to say that you would like to say before we go on? I'll go on to Anu's book if there's anything else you would like to add, or Put leaning forward as if she wants to.
I just wanted to say one quick thing about if the application feels rigorous, it's because it is. Don't give up. I've had a few people tell me they started the application and just stopped because it was overwhelming. Don't give up. You can't expect to hit a home run if you don't step up to the plate.
Yes, absolutely. And then each iteration helps you the next time. When I didn't get in, but I got to the next step. I got a letter that I had made, whatever the next, like a semifinalist or something. Then I went back to my application and said, what did they see in this that worked or didn't work? Or what do I see in this now that still resonates? And yeah, when you try, that's why we revise. That's why we have sensitivity readers. That's why we have editors. That's why we have a cohort that we reach out to, so that we see how our ideas are received and how we want to, put them into the world, which is a great segue. Unless Dion or Sarah, you want to say something, I'm going to segue into Anu's book, but I want to give you.
Yeah. I do want to say thank you. It was so beautiful and amazing to see everyone. I do have to go, but it's so inspiring to see all your faces.
Thank you. It's so good to
Bye,
see you, Sarah.
Bye, Sarah. I'll just
Sarah.
echo that and say
Thank you so much.
so much. It was so wonderful to be here with you. Oh, I'm sorry. I talked over you, Evelyn and Sarah. But thank you so much. It was wonderful to see you. And it was wonderful to be at Hedgebrook. It's an experience that changed my life. It will always stay with me. And there's nothing like being given time to write, being taken care of, and then getting a community of people who are in it with me, who I can continue to have relationships with for long after my time there. So
lovely. Yeah. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Sarah and Deanna will be back in the fall. Okay. Bye.
Love you guys. Bye.
bye. Love you.
Okay, so this is the part where we talk about our Hedgebrook book club that we're starting in the summer. Our first book is a news book. I'm learning how to work my camera, and there we go. Beyond Guilt Trips, Mindful Travel in an Unequal World. And I sent the authors some questions that I said I would ask, and one of them was going to be, what excites you about sharing your book? And then I realized, actually, I want to tell people what excites me about sharing your book. And what excites me about sharing this book in the summer is that we are all in situations where we either recognize our privilege or recognize where we're at a disadvantage, where we recognize otherness and sameness. And Anu, I feel like your book is such a beautiful example of how to, pull oneself out of that experience and examine it to prepare one to go back into an experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be travel to the global south, or I live in Oakland and I see that discrepancy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The discrepancies, whether it's wealth or other aspects of privilege and so on. And so reading your book, I just see there's so much for anyone working on their anti-racist work, working on their ways to see how they can show up for people who are different or the same.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to say? And so we'll be again in conversation on July 13th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and 5 p.m. In Ghana, and also in GMT. And if you join the book club, I see Anu's book is in the chat. You can also purchase it through our Hedgebrook's bookshop, and that means that a portion gets into goes back to the magic of how bookshop redistributes the profits from book sales. And in the week between now, the month between now and July 13th, I'll be sending out weekly kind of like on pace things about a news book. Would you like to? I know I'm talking a lot. Anu, what would you like to add about this book?
It's so interesting to hear you share your reflections on this book. I think that's one of the gifts of having something that was in our heads for so long out in the world, to see the way that it's received and incorporated into the lives and thoughts of other people. That's been tremendously gift-like for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really underscore something that you shared, that, traveling mindfully in an unequal world isn't about getting on a plane to go somewhere. It's noticing difference all around us, which is all around us all the time. And rather than getting paralyzed at navigating what's in front of us, let's have some more gentle tools to be able to engage with ourselves and each other and our complicated world a little bit better. I do lots of consulting work, and I'm in and out of a lot of different spaces, and people are tapped out. People are nervous. People are scared to engage with sensitive issues, not because they don't care. It's because they care so much that the stakes feel really high to engage. And so part of the invitation of my book is, because identity means so much, are there ways that we can lower the stakes in our conversation so we can actually speak and listen and connect a bit more authentically, with less fear, less eggshells, more bravery, more grace? And I love the invitation because I'm hearing and sensing from people that they're taking it on. It's lovely to have something in the world as a resource that groups and communities can come together and read and practice and feel more empowered to engage with themselves and others. It's tremendously wonderful.
Yeah, I would add to that. I'm reading this book in a different way now that I know that I'm preparing this kind of conversation. I'm actually listening to you read it.
Yes.
Through my library. And when I read it the first time, I would just open to a page and read just a little bit. And that's kind of all I needed to go on with whatever. It brought new ideas to me and new ways of looking at something that I'd already been looking at, or made, as you said, made me a little bit braver about noticing difference. And that was a very interesting, like a magic book, like, oh, and then look, I just opened to holding space together. It's just so many resources there to do what we do in our everyday lives, where we are trying to live in community that is quickly becoming more global. And also, how do we show up in a way that is more equitable, that in turn makes the world more equitable? So I'm really looking forward to reading this book and sending out ideas for people to think about when we meet again in July. Anyone put, or Nana, would you like to add anything to that before I go on? I just want to make sure we get to your books.
I'll just say, when I first met Anu at Hedgebrook, and I remember there were some strings of ideas related to this book that you spoke about then. And what's truly phenomenal to see now is that you were able to wrangle those ideas onto the page, and now it's this living document. And it went from words spoken out loud to some of us who got the privilege to meet you and know you at Hedgebrook, to now words that the world gets to see. And I think that's so incredibly beautiful. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah. I remember, Anu, you had a moment at Hedgebrook where you said, oh, I'm actually writing 2 books. And we'll talk about that more in July, because we'll have the time to kind of talk about how books get into the world from our heads to being back ordered on Bookshop. As I see, your book there's so many people that are getting it right now. But it was one book, and then you said, I just needed a couple days to rest or eat or take walks with Janine. I'm not quite sure, but had that moment of I don't know, epiphany.
Yes, that was an incredibly important moment in the book writing process, right? I think all of us have had those moments where we think we're doing one thing and then we realize we are pivoting, or this is something different. Or I had a couple of those, including the one that you're remembering, that what I'm looking at is actually 2 projects in one. And once I was able to separate, have more clarity on how I'd like to move forward. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good segue to Nana's book. This is, there we go. The Sex Lives of African Women, that started out as a blog, right? Is that right?
So it didn't start out as a blog per se, but because I've been blogging about sex and sexualities for a really long time, I had the idea for this book. So definitely the blog informed and inspired me. It made me realize that the diversity of African women's experiences around sex and sexuality was just so much more interesting than I would see mainstream media particularly reflect back to us. And I just thought, well, if I could interview, my initial goal was ridiculously ambitious and unrealistic. If I could interview an African woman from each country on the continent and put their experiences into a book, wouldn't that be great? So that was like my initial idea. And then of course, when reality hit, I decided to do as many countries as possible, but then also as a Pan-Africanist, interview people of African descent from around the world, so including the States, Costa Rica, Barbados, the UK, as well as people from the continent, Ghana, Kenya, Somalia, Senegal, Egypt. So I really just went for breadth. Yeah.
What excites me about sharing your book, Nana, particularly as it comes after, we'll be reading it after a news book, is that when I read your book the first time, I just had so much admiration. So what Nana does is, okay, so this is called Self-Discovery, Freedom, and Healing. So there we go. And the women that you interview, aside from in addition to the breadth of their experiences, not just geographic, but in terms of religion, in terms of age, in terms of on the ableism spectrum, how just the vast number of different women that are profiled in your book or share their stories. That's what it is. They share their stories. Many of them, they're written in first person. And I was just struck by how generous these stories are. And some of them are painful and some of them are joyful. And so that's the other diverse spectrum of stories. They're not all in one way of one approach to sexuality or showing up as a woman in the world, or an African woman in the world. And I felt like I learned so much about myself, about how I might share my deepest stories or ideas around sexuality, or maybe even not my deepest stories, maybe even just a surface story. How would I share that? And how does reading someone else's story help me understand my own? And the other thing that excites me about sharing this book is for other writers who are compiling stories from oral histories, for example, and just the way your book is in different sections. And there's so many ways you could have chosen to organize the book, and you chose this that has its own kind of narrative from self-discovery and healing to freedom. However, it's like this. There is a story within this mosaic of stories, and that's what really excites me about having other people in a room to talk about this book with you. That's what really excites me about even having this book club. I have these books that I've read. I know the authors. I broke bread with these authors, and I want other people to know you, to know your books, and also to learn from what you have put together in your book. So that's what excites me about your book. And before we go on to Put's book, I want to open it up for anything that you remember from our time at Hedgebrook, or just want to add before I talk about Put's book, Putsata's book.
Me specifically, or it's open to everybody?
Open to everyone.
Yeah, Nana's voice is unique in so many ways. your voice when you're speaking on your podcast or presenting is very unique. It's focused and it's warm and it's inviting. And I see that on the page of your book. You are sharing things that, again, we have so little frameworks and so little spaciousness to share. And here you are creating one more avenue for us to come together in our full authenticity. It's a treasure not only around sex and sexuality, but it kind of helps us just be more whole. I appreciate your work a lot.
Thank you, Anu, definitely. Because you're not just sharing the stories, you add something for each section about how you connect personally to either the women that you've been interviewing or the process or your own experience. That it's not like you're just putting other people on stage. You share this vulnerable space with the women that you interview and with us, because you bring us into your world. It's really beautiful.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Anu. That was, really nice to hear. I like to think of the book as, in many ways, a conversation starter. And I think that's what a lot of my work around sex and sexualities is about. Like, let's have conversations and let's talk about those subjects that we're often told are private, because I firmly believe that, in fact, when we're told anything is private and we shouldn't talk about it, I think those are the things that we absolutely need to talk about. And so, I feel very lucky that so many women across the globe shared their stories with me. And I also shared my stories with them. And I feel like part of what I really wanted to reflect in my writing style for this book, using the first person point of view for the bulk of the stories, is that sense of conversation, but also the sense of women speaking for themselves, which is very important to me.
And I'll just add that it was so incredible, Nana, to meet you and at Hedgebrook. And you are just so full of wisdom. But I remember thinking, my God, if there are so many taboo topics out there, what's one way to break through those taboos? And I just remember going back to my cottage the first time I met you, Nana, thinking, well, this girl's doing it. Like, she's completely busting up these taboos in a really exceptional, urgent, immediate, and extraordinary way. I am so, so glad that this book is out in the world. And by the way, for those of you who are out there in the audience, if you don't yet have Anu and Nana's book, please get it. They're so consequential. They're so important. And whether you're part of our book club or not, I just think that these are really essential reads.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, this is again a perfect segue, because we start out reading a news book and thinking about the ways we tiptoe around otherness, or not sure how to embrace what might be different and uncomfortable, and all of that. And so we have this framework that prepares us to read Nana's book and look at all these different ways that women experience themselves and as sexual women and sexuality. And then we get to Put's book, Ma and Me, and it's kind of like we're getting even like more focused, because now we have one story that we are following Put through. This is Put's memoir about I think of this as a memoir around taboo topics, as Put will say, a queer Cambodian American, and finding your authentic self and space, and living it, advocating it, bringing family into chosen family, but also going back to family history and family stories that aren't shared, perhaps. But would you want to add something to my my kind of off the cuff stutter endorsement of this really beautiful, beautiful memoir?
Yeah, just another way to say what you said. It really is about reaching for our own selfhood. And at its at a very foundational level, my memoir is about my experience of what it is like being a queer Cambodian refugee. But of course, there's all the scaffolding of themes and of other stories having to do with the fact that my family came from a country of genocide, Cambodia, and what that meant for me as a young person, knowing that I was gay and feeling an incredible debt to my mother specifically, which made me feel that I couldn't be my authentic self, and I could not reach for my selfhood, and I was sort of trapped in this narrative of my mother saving me on our escape from Cambodia in 1975, and therefore I couldn't reach for my true self, which is that I knew I was gay, until ultimately, as an adult, when we realize the wholeness of our lives and the wholeness of who we are, and we can see that. And one thing that I'll say is that in 2016, when I was there in Hedgebrook with all of you, and my mind was just exploding in so many ways, I could not have imagined back then that when my book came out in this current time, these themes of being gay and being Asian have just exploded. I couldn't have imagined that we're in a moment here in America with record numbers of book bans, 4,300 at least, just this academic year alone. A majority of those 4,300 books that have been banned in this academic year have either LGBTQ plus themes or are written by queer authors. I also couldn't have imagined the record number of hate crimes against my AAPI community, as well as my queer community. And so in a sense, I think that even though I didn't time my memoir to come out at this particular moment in our country's history and where we are at socially and politically in America, I'm so glad that it was here, and I'm so glad that I had that chance to begin some of that foundational work at Hedgebrook. I was working on this memoir while I was there. I didn't know what it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a very different story. I was trying not to write this particular memoir. I was trying not to write about myself, and I'm so glad that I did. I'm certain that part of the reason was that I was able to have some really important conversations around the farmhouse table during dinner, because that was the one time where it was mandated that we actually show up. We had to show up for dinner, which was great for me. I will always abide by a requirement to show up for dinner. And I was having all these incredible conversations with all of you, and it made me recognize the real story that needed to be written. And so I have Hedgebrook to thank for that, and all the people that I met at Hedgebrook, all the support that I got, that radical hospitality that you mentioned, Janine, just to be cared for in that way. It does something truly remarkable, which is that it opens you up to meet yourself on the page in ways that perhaps you couldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely. And I feel like it also gives you, I mean, I had the true honor of not just being there at the farmhouse table when you were discussing your beautiful modern love essay, and just thinking about how your book might find its space in the world, but also on all those Zoom calls during the pandemic when you would talk about a particular scene that you were writing, or a photograph that you found, and all of that. And there's what you find, what a writer finds they can, how they show up for their authentic selves. And then there's the support group around. So it's not transactional. I can't say it's equally rewarding. It's just so rewarding to support someone through that, even if your support shows up just by receiving their story as they're working through a passage of like, how am I writing this? How am I drafting this? What is the real story here? What am I not ready to write about right now, but I need to come back to, which is one of the things that we'll talk about in September. September 14th is Putsata's book date for the book club, because you one of the things you talk about is the existential wound and how we write about that and how we write around that. And so we'll discuss that, as well as your memoir and how you decided to shape the story that you did shape. And again, that has such a, as you mentioned, the book bans and this resistance from a place of hate, that there are many ways to combat that. And one of them doesn't look like fighting. It looks like literature. It is literature that someone can hear about or see in a different way, or decide to pick up a book, or just get that one thought of like how I can understand difference better, how I can understand that I might harbor hate, but it's actually fear, or it's actually myself I'm afraid of. I feel like these 3 books are such a beautiful example of how literature, how writers as artists and artists as writers, and a community that is Hedgebrook can help these stories reach a place of art and literature that is just as political as any march in the street, and just as important, because sometimes it needs to be a private moment. It needs to be a personal moment. How am I going to change to show up for others? And my role model is in these books, or listening to talk about their experience. I'm so excited. I'm throwing my earbuds out of my ears.
Janine, I want to just share one thing. I recently heard Put read at an event we were both at a few weeks ago. And I've been just thinking about your essay over and over again, Put, since I heard it. Your voice, I love the way that you are able to incorporate so much of your own story with the natural world around us. You helped us in that reading get grounded into the geography that you were experiencing, but also the geography of your heart, the geography of shame, the geography of care and self-acceptance. You can see the ways that you're writing yourself on the page, but you're also inviting us into the page as well. I love your work, and I love that we're in this community together. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. I think we're at time. I'm in a city where we have 1 o'clock sirens in case I don't know. And so the sirens are ringing and they're telling us it's time to go. Evelyn, thank you so much for interpreting this conversation today. This is my first time working with an ASL interpreter in a virtual way this way. And so I'm grateful that you were able to make this more accessible for for more people to participate in. And thank you to thank you to Anu and Putsata and Nana for their time today. Thank you all of you who are joining in. Hedgebrook for making it possible for us to be in community. It's all the garden metaphors and maybe some firework metaphors as well, and some ripple effects. I'm not quite sure, but it's just such a joy to be in conversation. And I'm really looking forward to diving into your books again, knowing that I'm sharing them, and as opposed to just taking what I need to take for me. It's going to be so rewarding. I hope those of you who want to join us, do please join us. And as Putsata said, if you're not inclined, it doesn't work out for your schedule, they will be taped, they will be recorded. We will have ASL interpretation on all of them, and go get these books, get them at the library, listen to the audiobook if you want to go that route. And I hope to see many of you in June.
Thank you so much, Janine. Thanks, you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.